6:31, morning to you, watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
It's interesting, we were talking a couple of moments ago about first aid and how the chair of the inquiry into the Manchester Arena bombing, one of the many things he said in a very scathing report, said that maybe members of the public should be better trained, or should be trained at all, in how to provide first aid, because if you're unlucky enough to ever be, up front to some terrible tragedy like the Manchester Arena bombing, would you know what to do? We've had some very interesting responses though, because John says, I did a 3-day St John's Ambulance first aid course, and I was very shocked at the end of the course where they offered me to get insurance in case someone's relative ever sued me for not giving the correct first aid. The government needs to look at this, because at the end of the day, you're only trying to help.
Well, it's a bit like nurses are told never to wear their uniform out of hospital, aren't they? Because then they have a responsibility to do something, they can be sued and all the rest of it. Paul says, as an ex-British soldier, I'm trained in first aid, but everyone should learn CPR. Just trying is better than doing nothing.
And Andy says people have been sued for negligence in some European countries for wrongly helping, and I think this just puts people off helping at all for fear of being blamed if the patient doesn't survive.
Janice, though, says, I was in a cafe when I started choking on a piece of lettuce. I couldn't breathe. The man came over and performed the Heimlich manoeuvre and saved my life. I asked him where he learned to do it, and he said he took a first aid course at work. He saved my life. Interestingly, the Heimlich manoeuvre, you've seen how they do it. I don't quite know how you practice on anyone. But Dr. Heimlich only performed it once towards the end of quite close to the end of his life. It made all the papers at the time, about 10 years ago, and so he came up with it, but didn't actually perform it on someone until very close to the end of his life, yeah.
Nicola says, we were at a school in Africa with German nuns, and we had special lessons on how to deliver a baby. At home, we knew about snake bites and dressing wounds. It's good to learn some basics.
Yeah, I think it just gives you a chance.
Do you know any basics? Have you ever had to do it?
That suing business is worrying. We live in a very litigious society, don't we? If someone's just trying to help, there you go. But anyway, let us know what you think. Time for the papers then this morning. The Times leads with the largest rise in interest rates for 3 decades yesterday.
And the Guardian covers the Manchester Arena inquiry, which found several victims died from survivable injuries.
The Mail goes with the Manchester Arena inquiry, which reveals several failings by the emergency services.
The Eye, though, leads with the Bank of England's prediction for Britain's longest ever recession.
The Express says stormy times ahead as the UK faces that recession.
And the Telegraph describes the Chancellor's plan to launch a capital gains raid.
The Mirror concentrates on the Manchester Arena bombing, focusing on the youngest victim, Safi. They say she fought but was let down.
And the Sun reports about HMS WAG, Wives and Girlfriends, set sail, it says, with a picture of the luxury liner which is going to be used by the Three Lions Wives and Girlfriends during the World Cup. Nice work if you can get it, hey?
Let's go through the papers then with former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Morning, you two. And David, let's start with the Mail, should we, and the Manchester Arena bombings. I have to say, I find this very difficult, because my niece was at that concert and was not injured, but actually, what was she at the time, about 14, very traumatised by it all.
I find it heartrending, and I've shed more than a tear or two. 8-year-old girl, left to die. And some of these people were given awards, some of these emergency services. The Mail says, what on earth has happened to our 999 services? And when you look in the Times, for instance, they say that there was only one paramedic in the city foyer, 2 more entered them 15, more than 90 minutes after the explosion. Fire crews this is the Times, took more than 2 hours to even attend the incident after Andy Berry, a station manager, chose to mobilise resources 3 miles from the arena. And as for the police, the police are never going to be outdone when it comes to be sheer mind-blowingly staggering incompetence. And Greater Manchester Police failed to declare a major incident for more than 2 hours.
I can't understand it, can you? I mean, even after this inquiry, and certainly when the chairman delivered his speech yesterday, he was scathing. What a scathing report. But you still can't understand how common sense didn't appear to prevail in so many cases.
Yes, and the Mail points out that a number of previous incidents, some of the same things happened and they hadn't been corrected. Now, I just think that, we're always ready to praise the emergency services, and no doubt there are occasions when they deserve praise. But this is, not just a scandal, it's a total, utter outrage, because people were left to lie on a floor, severely injured, when a couple of miles away there were trained individuals who were frightened for themselves and didn't go in. And what is the point of being a worker in an emergency service if your principal concern when you're sent to an emergency, either you or the people who run you, are they safe? And I think this is one of those moments when, I wish we had some trivia, but this is a scandal.
What do you think, Liz?
I saw a claim on the television reports of this last night that, because we saw the pictures, there were loads of ambulances outside, but the crews were not going in, and that was on instructions from the top. And somebody said a paramedic wouldn't defy management. If they were told not to enter, they wouldn't. But whoever took those decisions, and it goes right to the top with the commander who didn't declare it an emergency, I think they should be jailed for life, because they are culpable of manslaughter, at least, and it's just an awful situation. Even if I called an ambulance for my friend who collapsed in my kitchen and cracked her head on the floor, was unconscious, and I thought, at first I thought she was dead, and then there were signs of life, and we were calling an ambulance, and they said, oh, well, could you put her in the car and bring her here? And in the end, after an hour, we did, and then we passed the ambulance on the road, so we flagged them down, and then we did a transfer. It's just appalling. But the other thing that I understand what David's saying about being upset, especially hearing about that child. But there was also a youngish man as well who could have been saved. And this isn't about me, but I'm just giving it as a personal experience. I saw a terrible accident nearly 20 years ago now on Edgware Road just near here. And a motorcyclist, somebody made an illegal turn across Edgware Road at speed in a BMW, knocked this motorcyclist off his bike. And it was horrific. He was rolled under the wheels. And then the driver sped off, and me and my brother were just happened to be there in a cab and leapt out and rang an ambulance. And what was horrible was the wait. 25 minutes watching this guy go grey and holding his hand and saying, keep away, trying to talk. And this is like over an hour and a half.
The difference is, and I'm not trying to defend anything here, but I think because this was clearly a terrorist incident, and I think we've got to be careful about criticising people for not going in.
Oh, do you know what?
Because
I so disagree.
Because what would we do in those circumstances?
Go in.
Especially if you're a professional.
Go in.
Well, yeah, I just think unless you're in that position, if you're a first aider or a
9/11.
paramedic,
Well, the 9/11.
Yeah.
All of the people of rescue services went in.
Yeah, they did.
most of them died.
Yes, a lot of them died.
Job.
But what's the point of having emergency services, first responders, as they're called, particularly in the United States, if health and safety means that those people aren't allowed to respond? It's ridiculous.
You never know when it's going to happen, but you have to try and pass the test when it does. I was when I was in the cabinet, a couple of mortar bombs, IRA mortar bombs, landed in the garden, exploded. And it was the most determined attempt anyone had ever made to shut me up, actually. But I tell you that nobody panicked. Nobody thought of themselves. Or one or two colleagues, really some of the older colleagues, who were very shocked. And you just felt we stayed. There might have been another mortar bomb. We didn't think about that. We just wanted to get everybody out of the room in an orderly way. And I just think, these clowns 3 miles away And I bet a lot of these people are still working.
Yeah.
They're alive, whereas, this poor little kid is dead.
Well, David, in your time in government, wasn't that when the King's Cross tube fire occurred?
Yes.
And look how the emergency services, not knowing, not having a clue what they were going to face, the absolute literal meltdown underground, they went in.
That's right.
And there was none of this. And they'd got due praise and saved many, many lives. Look at the 7/7 bomb.
Yeah.
When there were concurrent bus and tube explosions, and the emergency service going, and the public as well. The stories about people having their limbs blown off, and members of the public taking off their belts and doing tourniquets and. It's heroic.
Well, it is heroic, but paramedics. It's not like being in the army. They don't sign up to put their lives at risk.
Well, they have to.
Actually, do you know what, Stephen? I rarely disagree with you because you're such a sensible chap.
Yeah.
But I do disagree with you on this because I think if as a paramedic you are not really prepared to go in and help where you're needed, you shouldn't be there.
But I don't blame the guys in green who are actually sitting in the front seats.
No, it's the people who are giving the orders.
And it's back to your point about our litigious society, and they're so risk averse and so paranoid about being culpable and taking responsibility. But they are to blame, and they should now face the consequences.
And by the way, this isn't the worst of it. He's got a chunky report to do. The worst of it was this blank wandering around with his huge backpack, and nobody went over and asked him what the hell he was doing.
All through
and a couple of the coppers who were supposed to be taken, man and a woman, these days, got off and had supper together.
Yeah, and he wandered
these
all.
disgraceful little incident shows.
He wandered all the way through.
We are let down.
By systems that should be better.
By systems should be better.
If they worked well, should be able to do the job.
Well, look at all the CCTV of him now progressing all the way from his train through Manchester Victoria Station, outside, and through the overpass into the MEN. There was one young lad who was being employed on probably minimum wage as a security guard.
Was the one
he
who
approached
did his
him,
best.
and he tipped me off, and they didn't do anything.
But I must say the papers. We often criticise the papers for trivialising the world, the rest of it. But, I mean, the reports here really hit the spot. And, the Times on the subject of the police, Debbie Ford, I imagine is still probably there doing whatever she's doing, Assistant Chief Constable and the Gold Commander, you see.
Yeah.
You don't have a sort of plastic commander, you're a Gold Commander in overall charge. This is what the chairman of the report said, quotes, made no effective contribution, unquotes. Now, she should go to her grave thinking the day that she was tested, she failed the test.
Well, no, that's a fair point.
And also, I think what gets me down is, and that's why when the chairman delivered his speech yesterday, he said it is not enough. After 7/7, there were lessons that should have been learned. It's not enough to keep saying lessons will be learned.
No, they said
or
that again.
never again.
Yeah.
They've got to make sure they act on things.
And that's it. And that's where the Mail is interesting, because the problems that happened in Manchester, the Mail claims had happened at a couple of these previous awful incidents, and lessons had not been learned.
It's such a vacuous phrase. The commander of the fire services in Manchester started off his day with, lessons should have been learned, but they weren't learned. Oh, it's just insulting.
It's that phrase you keep saying, isn't it? Awful.
Let's have a look at the recession, Liz. In the front of the Times.
Don't worry, folks. Next segment, we're going to have Boy George.
Yeah, she's the...
All my gossip about Boy George ahead of In the Jungle. Some light relief. Well, the recession is going to be the worst one. Why? Well, I think in a nutshell, we've been living on borrowed money and borrowed time forever, and the cost of things like furlough and all the billions that were stolen from the taxpayer by bogus claims for business grants,
Yeah,
etc.,
exactly.
which is absolutely no effort to recoup. Anyway,
It's probably more expensive to recoup than what the money
Possibly.
they'd save. This is the trouble with all this.
But anyway, we're now paying the price for that. I don't think it's anything to do with. Obviously, it's sent the markets into a flat for a while, but I don't think it's. Liz Truss hasn't created this debt. Her proposals were actually implemented in the end. This has been building up, and this so-called black hole in the finances, it was inevitable, and we would have had to pay it off. Now we're talking about recession, when what we need is growth, but that's all being forgotten there. I just don't understand, and I've seen some great stuff from Liam Halligan on here, and there's a guest, an American economist with long blonde hair. Sorry, I don't remember her name. She talks a lot of Sanchez today, and I thought, thank you, because I've been saying, I've been saying, I've been saying, I don't understand with my basics in economics, A level and at university. So I have actually got some education in economics, but I don't understand this putting up the interest rates in this particular situation. And that's what she was saying. It's been the received wisdom that to bring down inflation, you put up interest rates. But she said yesterday, and I thought, thank you. These are particular circumstances where the interest, where inflation is not being demand-led. In other words, there isn't too much money chasing too few goods, therefore supply and demand, the prices go up or wages go up. This is because we've got a war that's causing rises in fuel and food. I just really can't understand how they can sit there and say you're going to have to pay £500 a month more for your mortgage, but we're also, at the same time as your food bills going up, the petrol pump prices they don't need to take money out of people's pockets because people are struggling anyway.
And once again, there's very good reporting. I mean, we're focusing on the Times. I mean, just one paragraph in the Times, the fourth paragraph on the front page, I mean, just gets it there. You get the information you need in a very short order. Britain is facing a 2-year recession as the downturn risks shrinking the economy by 3%. The bank said in forecast, based on interest rates climbing above 5%, unemployment is forecast to nearly double from 3.5% to 6.5%, and household disposable incomes will fall by an average of £800 next year. This is stark.
But as someone who was Chief Secretary to the Treasury, do you understand, do you agree with what the Bank of England's doing?
Well, I mean, I don't think the bank has played a wonderful game over the whole course of this, but I think what they're now doing is what they have to do. But you see, what depresses me, period when I was Chief Secretary, not due to particularly anything I did, the percentage of the national wealth consumed by the state was the lowest ever. We now go into this recession with, I mean, I think Boris has got to take the blame for a lot of that, but Sunak cannot escape a lot of this. Chucking money at helping people through the effects of the pandemic, when the history now shows an awful lot of them were just cheating. They were asking for money, and of course the cupboard is now bare when the real challenge to the public finances is happening, and that is depressing.
What was the alternative at the time?
Well, the alternative
people were crying out
was
for
to
money.
keep. Yeah, but I know we're all crying out for money. But the point is, it's to keep a sense of proportion. Look, 150,000 people, or what it was, died in this pandemic. But we always have to remember, sad though that is, that was out of 55, 60 million people. When you look at the Black Death, now when we talk about a pandemic, the Black Death, that was the real thing. Half the people who got the Black Death died. Here it was well under 1%, and the average age of the people who died in the pandemic was, 77, 78? I mean, I don't want to make it sound as though I'm treating this lightly, but the amount of public money that was chucked away simply means when the moment comes that there's a real need to spend public money, there isn't any.
Yeah.
There isn't any.
On that note, Liz, David, we need to leave it. Hopefully we'll get through more than 2 papers next time.
It's big subjects, though, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Do you want some fun in the next hour?
Sweet do.
I can do the Heimlich manoeuvre live on air on you if you'd
No,
like.
thank you.